Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going in depth into my week number 10 must-start and must-sit quarterbacks and tight ends. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. And if you have any questions about week number 10, either ask down below in the comment section or in the Discord linked in our pinned comment and in the video description. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 10 quarterback, start, or sit decisions. We begin with my must-start quarterbacks and tight ends, headlined by Justin Fields of the Chicago Bears, going up against the Detroit Lions at home in Chicago. He's currently the quarterback number 8 in points per game at the quarterback position, despite being pretty awful, honestly, to start off the season, and he was the quarterback number 1 last week up against the Miami Dolphins. In that game, he had 17 completions on 28 attempts for 123 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also had 15 rushes for 178 yards and a touchdown. He has had 3 games in a row of over 20 points and 5 solid games in a row. And this week, he faces the soft as baby shit, Charmin Ultra Soft Detroit Lions defense. I fully expect Justin Fields to have yet another humongous performance, just like he had up against the Dolphins. It would not shock me at all one bit if Justin Fields finished this week as the quarterback number 1 in all of fantasy football. Again, this matchup up against the Lions is amazing. I know last week Aaron Rodgers was put inside of a mental box by the Detroit Lions defense, but ultimately it was more of Aaron Rodgers fucking up over the Lions defense actually doing something. Like, the Lions defense just took advantage of Rodgers playing awful. It wasn't that the Lions defense played so good, in my opinion, that they stopped Aaron Rodgers. So Justin Fields in this spot up against Detroit at home in the Windy City. I love Justin Fields. My other quarterback is going to be Jimmy Garoppolo, Jimmy Guap, Jimmy G-Spot, Jimmy G-String, Jimmy Garoppolo, quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, going up against the LA Chargers at home in San Francisco. Currently the quarterback 18 in points per game, which is the least surprising thing ever because Jimmy Garoppolo, while he has the looks of an Adonis, he is the most average quarterback to ever grace the NFL. Week 8 up against the LA Rams quarterback number 13, 21 completions on 25 attempts for 235 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, 1 rush for 3 yards. The LA Chargers defense has been an absolute disaster this season. It feels like every single year, analysts, including myself, talk up the LA Chargers defense. Oh, look how good this defense looks on paper. And then the paper is ripped in half and eaten by your dog because the LA Chargers defense is absolutely awful. I fully expect an excellent performance out of my guy Jimmy Garoppolo here, Jimmy Guap, as long as Christian McCaffrey doesn't just get like 3 rushing touchdowns or steal another passing touchdown like he did last time out up against the Rams. I fully expect a big game out of Jimmy Garoppolo. At number 3, our third must-start player is Dalton Schultz, tight end of the Dallas Cowboys, going up against the Green Bay Packers in Green Bay. Currently the tight end number 30 in half PPR points per game. Schultz has been banged up for a majority of this season, and without Dak, he was basically invisible, doing his best Houdini impression. You could not see him. Though, with Dickie Dak Prescott back, he has had back-to-back Michael Jordan 96-97 top 16 tight end games in half PPR with at least 5 targets in each of those games. Last week up against the Chicago Bears, technically not last week, obviously, because the Dolphins played up against Chicago, but his last game, because they're on bye last week in week 8, tight end number 9 in half PPR, 6 receptions on 7 targets for 74 yards. With the schedule really opening up for Dalton Schultz, I also feel confident in him going forward, but I especially like this matchup up against the Packers because the Green Bay Packers defense is incredibly injured, and it doesn't really seem like Dak Prescott loves to throw the ball to Michael Gallup as much as he did in the past. So Dalton Schultz is now the number 2 weapon on this team behind CeeDee Lamb, which gives me even more confidence in Dalton Schultz. I love the matchup, and I think it's finally the bounce back time for Dalton Schultz because let's be honest with you, if you drafted this fucker in like the 5th round and he's tight end number 30, he's been a bust thus far. At number 4, my other must-start tight end is Greg Dulcich, tight end of the Denver Broncos, going up against the Atlanta Titans in Tennessee. Tight end number 6 in half PPR points per game. The Broncos were on bye in week number 9, so we got to go ahead and hop back in the time machine and look to week number 8, just like we did with Dalton Schultz. In that game, he was tight end number 8 in half PPR, playing up against the Jacksonville Jaguars in London. 4 receptions on 5 targets for 87 yards, and he's now had 3 solid games in a row after being activated by the Denver Broncos. Ultimately, Greg Dulcich is one of the more interesting players in fantasy football because of the fact that the Denver Broncos offense is so fucking bad, but yet Greg Dulcich is such a powerful tight end on this team. He just garners targets, so I feel comfortable playing him up against the Titans, even though Russell Wilson and this whole Denver Broncos offense has been an absolute disgrace. But before we pivot into the must-sit quarterbacks and tight ends, I would like to give you guys a word from our friends and our sponsor over at DraftKings Sportsbook. Click on the link down below in the video description if you are a brand new user, and you will get this exclusive offer. Bet $5 on any pregame money line. Could be the NFL, the NHL, the MLB, college football, and if your bet wins, you'll receive $200 in free bets. Again, you have to be a brand new user, and you have to click on the link in the video description down below. Now, since your bet has to win, my best bet, in my opinion, would be to go to college football. Obviously, anything can happen. Upsets happen all the time, but there are some games that seem like they're probably going to win. Michigan is one of my favorite bets on the weekend, so bet Michigan, $5 on the money line, and you'll receive $200 in free bets if they win. Back on into things, we move to my must-sit players headline by a guy that we kind of just insinuated talking about with Greg Dulcich, Russell Wilson, quarterback of the Denver Broncos, going up against the Atlanta Titans in Tennessee. Quarterback number 23 in half PPR points per game. Russ has only scored over 20 points once this season. I feel like things have looked more positive, right? I'll give Russ some credit. It has looked a little bit better. But until he actually produces real fantasy football numbers multiple weeks in a row, I feel like it is basically impossible to want to roll him out. Week 8 up against the Jaguars in a game where I thought he looked good. Quarterback, 21. 18 completions on 30 attempts for 252 yards and a touchdown with 1 interception. 4 rushes for 17 yards. Again, things have looked a little bit better. He hasn't looked like as much of a dumpster fire, but can you really be confident in Mr. Unlimited right now? I don't think so. It's a little bit dangerous. It's a little spicy. Andy Dalton, next up, quarterback of the New Orleans Saints, going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh. Quarterback 21 in points per game. Dalton has been pretty mid all season long. Last week up against the Ravens, it was a disaster. Quarterback 20, 19 completions on 29 attempts for 210 yards, 1 touchdown, and an interception. This matchup up against the Pittsburgh Steelers, to me, screams as though it might be an incredibly low-scoring game with 2 defenses that are pretty decent. Like, the Steelers obviously aren't the best without TJ Watt, but these are 2 defenses that I think could get into a defensive battle because Pickett and Dalton just aren't all that great. So I think there's a high chance that maybe even if the Saints do somehow have some molly-whopping game, that it's on the back of Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill, and Andy Dalton doesn't really do too much. Again, Dalton has been just about average. Like, he had a solid stretch of games about 2 weeks where it's like, oh, you can actually start Andy Dalton. But based upon what I saw against the Ravens, I'm not fucking with that again. Now at the number 3 player to be sitting this week is Dawson Knox, one time if you are with me, tight end of the Buffalo Bills, going up against the Minnesota Vikings at home in Buffalo. Currently the tight end number 24 in half PPR points per game. In 7 games, he has only eclipsed 10 points once. His volume has been incredibly low in this offense, averaging just 3.8 targets per game. He also isn't scoring touchdowns like we're used to down the stretch of last season. Last week up against the Jets, tight end 22, 3 receptions on 4 targets for 25 yards. Last week, I loved Dawson Knox because the Jets defense sucks ass at stopping tight ends. And still, we don't have a great game out of Dawson Knox. So what are we meant to do? And now it seems like Case Keenum's going to play. This is a recipe for disaster. You ever seen the Powerpuff Girls? Sugar, spice, and everything nice? This is the recipe for disaster here. Dawson Knox is going to be probably a big bust at the tight end position this season, unless things miraculously turn around. My final player that is a must-sit is Foster Moreau, tight end of the Las Vegas Raiders, going up against the Indianapolis Colts at home in Viva Las Vegas. Currently, the tight end 33.5 PPR points per game, and normally we see when Darren Waller is out. Darren Waller now on the IR, and so is Hunter Renfrow, so maybe he does get a slight boost from that, but normally when Waller was out, it's like we're used to Moreau not necessarily filling in the big shoes of Darren Waller, right? But playing well enough to be start-worthy. But we have not seen that this year. Last week up against the Jaguars, tight end 26, 2 receptions on 5 targets for 42 yards and a fumble. Come on. Come on. There's no way we can be confident starting Foster Moreau. And it's funny because the Colts are absolutely awful, and I still don't feel confident in playing Foster Moreau. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you ended up enjoying, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, as well as hitting that like button. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. And make sure you guys check out our sponsor, DraftKings. Bet $5 on any pregame money line and win $200 in free bets if your bet wins. Link down below in the video description. I love you guys all so much. I hope you all have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, goodbye.